Hi, this is Raphael, and tonight I'm going to present on Old Man's Cloth, which is a piece by Anatsui that was completed in 2002 as a commentary on the trajectory of colonial history in Africa and the practices of modern consumerism interacting with traditional African cultural values. So, in order to make this commentary on traditional cultural values and colonial history in Africa, Anatsui used bottle tops, and not just any kind of bottle tops, but the bottle tops of um, from bottles of liquor, um, because it represented the trade between the Africans and Europeans during the time of the transatlantic slave trade. And these caps have been thrown away as trash, flattened out, or organized according to color, as you can see uh, here in the art piece. So here's some black, and here's some red, and here's lots of kind of silver, and here's some uh, bronze colored uh, kind of organization of color. And then they were connected by copper wire, which is really, from what I've seen, unconventional. But a lot of Ellen Atsui's work looks like this. It is nearly inevitable, I think, to start off with, that in a class on Africa and world history, if there is something that we wonder about, it's whether or not there's something distinctively African about a piece of artwork. Um, and specifically, for this case, about Anatsui's artwork. And there are a few ways to answer this. A good starting place is looking at the techniques that are used. Um, Number one, we'd ask, is grabbing bottle caps in and of itself unique? After all, they are just, objects that you can find laying around the house or in the trash even, as they were for this art piece. And certainly Marcel Duchamp with his ready-mades can be said to have done the same thing in his art. Um, but that is not what would make this piece unique, would not make it uniquely African. If we can say that there's something uniquely African about Elana Sui's work here, um, I'm going to say that it's first that the creator of the work of art is African, and that is using at least one element of art that is known as traditionally Ghanaian. And the second is that the artwork makes a comment on in reference to the history of Ghana and Africa at large. The comment that the artwork makes in reference to African history is that African and European history is intertwined. It is true, as I mentioned before, that the colors are sorted, but as after these colors are sorted, they are placed in areas within other colors. So we can take a look at this red right here that's surrounded by silver, and the silver is also surrounded by lots of gold, and the gold is surrounded by more silver, and then we see that true of the red here, of the black right here, of the gold here, that it's kind of all over the place. And in fact, if we look at all the black, which we can think of African cultures in this way, it is surrounded by so much in each of the areas of this artwork, surrounded, and it's almost isolated. But this piece represents that there is basically no European history without African history. And this statement reflects a concept voiced by Northrop in Seven Myths of African World History. He writes that before about 48,000 BCE, human history was African history, and that's on page 3 of his book. Another concept in the course that is echoed in this piece is how Africa has been the subject of colonialism and the slave trade. I want to go back to what I said about the bottle caps for a moment. The bottle caps had been thrown away and flattened out. They were artifacts of history that most people would, I argue, reasonably think is worthless. But the artist takes what has been thrown away and reshapes it back into something visual that we can learn from. The bottle caps can represent the parts of history, African history, that were available to Europeans that were delegitimized because Africans were said to have no history. Northrop cites examples where the famous dialectician and German philosopher, Hegel, held this attitude when he said, "What we properly understand by Africa is the unhistorical, undeveloped spirit still involved in the conditions of mere nature, and which had to be presented here only as on the threshold of world history. So just as the facts and bits of diverse African history were treated in similitude with trash, um, so were these bottle caps. And the bottle caps went through a transformation, however. Anatsui has carefully constructed this African artwork from objects that were left behind, just as scientists using DNA were able to begin revolutionizing our our understanding, um, using, yes, the DNA, but also writing, cave art, and linguistic evidence that is cited on pages 3 through 9. And that's I have a bit more for analysis on this piece of art, but that's all I'm going to say for time's sake. If there are any more questions about anything that I should clarify, I'm happy to answer any questions in the discussion board or via email.